Divorce and remarriage. What does the Bible teach about who may divorce and remarry? Divorce and remarriage have become common as civil law allows no-fault divorce. A husband or wife may dissolve a marriage for almost any grounds and remarry, regardless of the will of their spouse. The result is that many people marry without considering the teaching of the Bible. Is fornication, or adultery, the only scriptural grounds for divorce, or does the gospel allow marriage to be dissolved for other grounds? Please consider this careful study of the biblical teaching. This paper pertains to the biblical view of divorce and remarriage. All scriptures listed here refute remarriage and are emphatic concerning this, not allowing any basis for remarriage. All the scriptures should be read together in context. Read the gospel scriptures together to see their consistency and harmony. The following are New Testament verses and are very clear concerning these matters. The only passage that is repeatedly misinterpreted and some use to find loopholes is Matthew 19:9. These individuals discount the other texts by misrepresenting Jesus' meaning in Mount 19. I will explain this passage contextually, but first here is a list of the other verses that should be studied: Luke 16:18, Romans 7:2-3, 1 Corinthians 7:10-11, 16:39, Mark 10:2-12, Matthew 5:32, Ephesians 5:31-32. A contextual look at Matthew 19 verses 3-9. Verse 3, Pharisees tempting Jesus by questioning God's eternal divine order, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Verse 4 He answered, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? Verse 5 For this cause shall a man cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Verse 6 Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together let not man put asunder. Verse 7 They say unto him, Why did Moses then command, unwarrantedly asserted by Pharisees, to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? Note, this directly refers back to Deuteronomy 24:1-4, which is a product of man. It was a penal permission and was not originally part of God's eternal law of marriage as stated in Genesis 2:24, nor was this ever given as a blessing from God. Verse 8 covers, For the cause of fornication, he saith unto them, Moses because of the hardness of your hearts suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. Note, God's will in the beginning before the law of Moses, to become one flesh. Also Jeremiah 3:1, they say. Again it was not God, but was for the hardness of their hearts and was a temporary concession suffered for a limited time only. This passage is referring back to Deuteronomy 24:1-4. Some laws were punitive and were not good as Ezekiel 20 especially verses 18-25. God never said not to take those wives back again, they said it. Conclusion, can I divorce for fornication? Answer, no. Verse 9 covers, every other cause except fornication, and I say unto you, whosoever every married person shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and marry another, commits adultery, and whoso marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery. This passage is dealing with all other causes that one could think of to divorce. The reason for the clause except it be for fornication in verse 9 is because Jesus is excluding it here because he covered fornication in verse 8. This is often misinterpreted by liberals as an allowance. We can conclude that in both verse 8 and verse 9 Jesus has given no endorsement for divorce for any cause. The second part of verse 9 gives no concession for remarriage, and this passage thus harmonizes with all other New Testament passages covering this subject. Jesus covered the total divorce and remarriage question here in Matthew 19 verses 8 and 9. He covered all situations, all causes. The answer to the question, can I divorce for any cause? The conclusion Jesus gives is no. Can I remarry? The answer is no. Exception being only upon the death of spouse Romans 7 verses 2 and 3 and 1 Corinthians 7:39. Let me expand a bit more on Matthew 19 verses 3-9. Please notice in verse 3 the Pharisees are only addressing the question of divorce to Jesus. They say nothing about remarriage, so to stay in proper context the subject of remarriage is not addressed. Also notice in verse 3, The Pharisees asked Jesus, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? The question is not only for fornication, but the many other reasons that many use to put away a spouse. Ultimately Jesus will answer the total question of every cause. Jesus' answer in verses 4 to 6 is all the answer that should have been required. Verse 6 is pretty emphatic, what therefore God has joined together let no man put asunder. However, the Pharisees were not content with that all-encompassing answer, just like many today are not content with that all-encompassing answer, so they proceed to verse 7. When they ask Jesus this question concerning Moses and the commandment of divorcement, this immediately refers back to Deuteronomy 24:1-4, which deals with uncleanness as the reason for divorce. The Hebrew word uncleanness used in Deuteronomy 24:1 is the same word used in Leviticus 20:11, uncovered father's nakedness, also in Leviticus 18:8, nakedness of father's wife. Therefore the reason for divorcement in Deuteronomy 24:1 is what the New Testament calls fornication. Jesus comes back with his answer in verse 8, which deals with the question of divorce for fornication. Again his answer is very emphatic, from the beginning it was not so. There is no loophole here, no wiggle room whatsoever. Jesus completes the answer in verse 9 to cover everything else when he says, except it be for fornication. The actual Greek text reads, if it be not for fornication. Jesus in verse 8 is addressing the direct question of fornication that the Pharisees posed to him in verse 7. In verse 9, Jesus addresses all the other reasons some would use for divorce, not counting fornication or except it be for fornication, or the literal Greek if it be not for fornication. Jesus' answer is still an emphatic no. Bottom line is that putting away a spouse with the intent to remarry using Matthew 19:9, Jesus gives an emphatic no. Those who try to use this passage for remarriage are unbiblical, as the passage doesn't speak to remarriage, only divorcement, and, of course, Jesus says no to divorce. A final note to think about concerning verse 9. Why would Jesus say, from the beginning it was not so, and then turn around in verse 9, and say I forgot to tell you, I have an exception? Jesus doesn't double talk. He hates divorce and he always will. There are no exceptions. Passages that will further clarify the marriage, divorce, and remarriage question in Matthew 19:8-9 are, Jeremiah 3 verses 1, 14, 22, Hosea 2:7 and 3:1, Malachi 2:14-16, Isaiah 54:5-8. These scriptures basically teach reconciliation of the sinning spouse. In God's way of thinking, divorce does not dissolve or sever a lawful marriage. In Hosea, for example, God told Hosea to take back the defiled Gomer. The difference in response with Hosea was that he did not have a hard heart and did not look to Deuteronomy 24 verses 1-4 as an escape. Penal permission, they were told in Ezekiel 20:18 not to follow the statutes of their fathers, but because of rebellion God gave them some statutes originating with their fathers which directly conflicted with the law of God. These statutes were not good and gave them what they wanted. This is an example of God's righteous retribution and punitive judgment for rebellion verses 18-25, and those involved would suffer the consequence of their sin of unforgiveness and hard-heartedness. This is similar to God giving the Israelites quail in place of man in Numbers 11 because of their lust, which was accompanied by a plague verse 34.
Grace pouring forth like a fountain flowing, our hearts open wide to sing your praise. And our sound becomes sweet with your anthems ringing. Praise to the name of the Lord. Sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah.